All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and call the Scott County Board of Adjustments to order this evening. If you haven't signed in, you plan on speaking, please do so. If you don't want to speak, that's okay with us too. So we'll try to move this right along this evening. We need to take a look at the minutes from last month, so if you have had a chance to review those, I will entertain a motion.
I've reviewed those, and I'll make the motion to approve the June the 6th, 2024 minutes.
Janet Holland makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Rachel seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. Charlie, would you like to swear in the speakers?
Yes, everyone signed in to speak. If you stand, raise your right hand, please. You swear a firm statement you make tonight with the truth, the best of your information and belief. Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll go ahead and hear our first application, S-2024-29.
Our first application is actually for 3 sites owned by the same property owner, all for front yard setback variances of varying degrees, located on Davis Turkeyfoot Road and Hinton Cemetery Road. The most significant of which is at 333 Davis Turkeyfoot, where they're looking for a variance from 75 feet to 30 feet. The middle child of it is the request for the property address 1130 Hinton Cemetery. They're looking for a variance from 75 to 54.18 feet, and the kind of larger, or the least variance requested is to the property at 415 Davis Turkeyfoot Road from 75 feet to 64.08 feet. And these are all under the same property owner at this time, and they're all agriculturally zoned properties of varying sizes, ranging from 5.7 at the smallest to 10.3 at the largest. Having access onto Davis Turkeyfoot Road for 2 of the parcels, or Hinton Cemetery Road, kind of at a junction of multiple roads, crosshairs type situation, up in the county, with the nearest arterial being Double Culvert Road. And staff does recommend approval of the application. So this is an aerial shot of the property here. I tried to have it zoomed out enough so that you could see the various roads coming in. So Davis Turkeyfoot kind of comes in, kind of has a dip down, and then goes back up. Burgess Smith kind of comes into the intersection with Davis Turkeyfoot, and then kind of is no longer a road identified specifically by name. And then at the very end, or the easternmost portion of the parcel, is the intersection of Davis Turkeyfoot and Hinton Cemetery, where if you continue north, you'd be on Davis Turkeyfoot, south you're on Hinton Cemetery. This is the plat of the parcel that, when it was subdivided, I'm just gonna give them a second. The surveyor at the time did not do what we typically see for surveying, which is the right-of-way is interlaid within the building setback lines. So the request for 75 feet is, or the requirement of 75 feet is atypical because our standard is 50 feet. But again, because these are road and then the right-of-way, and then the end of the right-of-way is there, and then the building setback starts, which creates that 75-foot distance from center line of road. And the applicant is looking to essentially use existing foundations on the properties for new residences, or existing flat areas for new residences. This is kind of an illustration here of how these are laid out. You can see the areas in that pinkish red color is the setbacks, the blue line is the right-of-way, the orange square is the location of where the residence would ideally be located if the variance was granted, and then the 2 arrows are their entrances from the road. These 2 are the parcels with Davis Turkeyfoot addresses and Davis Turkeyfoot driveways. Our last one is the largest of the parcels, with our address off of Hinton Cemetery Road. The arrow identifies where the driveway is, and then the square shows where the location is, right-of-way, setbacks, all that type of thing. This is not a typical situation, but it is a very steeply sloped property. So you can see I tried to interlay the aerial imagery, the topography in the various layers, and then also I showed where the drainage lines are and the proposed home sites roughly located. As you are proceeding from north to south, the slope drops, and then there's a drainage center line that kind of goes through the last third of the parcels. And really the most flattest areas that you can see on this is closest to the road, which is why the road is located there. It isn't located cut into the side of the mountain because it's flatter where it is now. So the homes and those sites have already been flattened by previous users or by previous homes and foundations, and the applicant is just looking to reuse those foundations and homes and just wants to have this kind of finalized and kind of ironed out all nice and neat so that they can go forward and either install manufactured housing or start doing a traditional stick-built home. Ultimately, these are the 4 findings here. We talk about the characteristics of each property. I also talk about the area and its nature and its sloped areas with its drainage areas to the rear of the property. Talk about the impacts on public health, safety, welfare. These are all outside of right-of-way, which is where you could potentially be widening the road for addressing road infrastructure maintenance, widening if they needed to. And these are outside of that, so it would be reasonably anticipated that if a road was going to be widened, it wouldn't be encroaching that close to these homes. And staff ultimately finds that these meet these findings requirements. A lot of homes in this area are built closer to the roads because those areas tend to be the more flatter locations for residences to be built on without having to do a lot of work. They're not really impacting any major sloped areas or anything like that, and it ultimately is a characteristic of the surrounding area. As such, staff recommends approval of the 3 variances for the front yard setbacks, subject to the 4 conditions of approval stated. And I kind of combine them all because they all are owned by the same person in the same area. And so if that's confusing, we can always separate them. But I think in this instance, it makes more sense as opposed to reading 3 identical staff reports or near identical staff reports. So ultimately, though, staff does recommend approval of the variances as described previously.
Okay, any questions for Elise? Okay, thank you, Elise. Would the applicant like to say anything?
I'm here to answer questions if anyone has them.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Anybody else would like to speak on this? Yes, ma'am?
I'm here to represent one of the landowners.
If you'll come up to the podium, please. State your name for us, if you will, please.
I'm Helen Harris, and I'm representing my father, Clyde Duncan. His property is directly across.
Okay.
We just want to express concern. We don't agree with making the change. You know, the property it was a farm originally. Anyone that looked at the property saw how steep it was. We don't feel that there's a reason for exception. Everyone else in that area and all the way down Burgess Smith, of course, have followed these same guidelines. There have been plenty of houses built out there on a steep incline. There are plenty of reputable builders that can build on those type of properties. So it's just a concern, more, pets, children, dwellings closer to the road. Those roads are bad enough as it is. They're not up to the code, maybe, or standards they should be for the amount of traffic now. We've all been here a long time. I know things have changed, but they're very narrow. So we feel like it's a danger to have buildings, houses that close to the road, because that's a pretty big exception. It's not like they're asking for 10 or 15 feet just because of that's a pretty big difference. That's setting the house pretty close to the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to speak?
So I think the thing here is our surveyor didn't, Elise, you might speak to that again. He actually put more of a setback in the plat than is required. Am I right, Elise? Confusion become of where you count from, the middle of the road or the edge of the road.
So that is a lot of areas, especially in the mountainous areas of Scott County. They measure their property lines from the center line of the road, and then the road just happens to be on your property. And then the right of way is just set off from that center line. So in this instance, I can't exactly speak to the language in the deed, if the deed references additional right of way, But it isn't uncommon that this happens and then they get these additional setbacks that would be otherwise not required or imposed upon others because of this kind of layout here.
So that's the main issue, is that
Yes.
he put in a larger setback than is typically required. And number two, parcels 2 and 3, the setback actually goes through where homes did exist. There was a single wide on parcel 2 that I tore down and did away with, and your setback is including where that home was. So we're just wanting to get back to where our foundations were, and, you know, any extra that we can get so that we can build back a better home than what was there when I purchased the property.
So I agree with you, but I do have a offsetting question. Wouldn't it make sense to go back and have it resurveyed with the right boundaries put in place?
I mean, that could be an option that is available, and you could, as the board, make that determination. That doesn't always mean that this was explicitly an error by the surveyor. The language in the deed may reference a setback of this significance, and a
I don't believe it
resurveying.
does, yeah.
Yeah, a
It
resurveying
does.
may just essentially prove the same point that we have today. I don't know if it would or would not, I can't speak to the language of it, but that is always the risk with some of these areas of where there's these extra setbacks. You see these, it won't change anything, it's just money spent. That would be,
Well, now I'm really confused.
okay.
So-
So, okay,
Go ahead.
I apologize. So,
Having it resurveyed would just cost me money. We're still back at the same situation.
yes.
Well, let me ask a question. If that's the case, why am I hearing that it may be an error on the easement side?
It may just be something that's a recorded deed for a long period of time, and not something that is.
I don't think the deed speaks to the setbacks.
Am I the only one confused? Are you confused?
Well, I don't think so.
Good, 'cause I am.
The plat seems to show that the setback is measured from the center line, and setbacks are not
what I
supposed to be measured from the center line.
Right.
They're supposed to be from the outer edge of the right of way.
That's what I thought.
These old roads have very little right of way. So by saying it's 75 feet back, that probably does in fact extend too far for the actual setback. Just simply because the right of ways aren't that wide in the first place. They shouldn't be from the center line, so that, I think that's an error, period.
Right.
I hate to even suggest though redoing that because I can't imagine it's really worth that. What would be appropriate is to just simply, and most of those right of ways are, well, they barely cover the pavement. I mean, a little bit.
Right.
They don't do well out there because when these things were laid out, they didn't expect people to be driving out there. At least not in cars. So it's more a matter of looking at what the proposed setback is just to get the houses built and see if that's at all reasonable and where this property drops off. And I understand that point, but we give relief quite frequently when you've got these kinds of drop-offs.
Look at the slope.
I mean, 20 degrees is
crazy.
pretty substantial. And I know the place to be very well too.
Oh.
And it's a lot of it.
All of those roads were built on the ridge top, and they
That's
took up
right.
the whole
And
ridge.
that's why by definition they fall off quickly.
Yeah.
And they're great for bicycles, not great for cars.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. But I think it was a mistake. There's just no way this was ever intended to be 75 feet, and the 75 feet is really representative of what's there, because it's from center road, not the right of way. So the thing you really ought to be looking at is, all right, what is the setback needed to have a reasonable use of the property without maybe not making it unbuildable, but making it incredibly expensive and perhaps likely not to ever get any real use out of it.
Right.
Because of it.
But there's already foundations on track 2 and 3.
That's what I was going to ask. So if she was concerned about having houses on the road, but historically there have been houses
Yes.
on those two roads.
Yes.
This isn't new for two of them.
Mrs. Wells lived in track 3, and her house burnt a few weeks after she passed away. And parcel 2, when I bought the property a couple of years ago, had an existing single wide that was substandard, and I got rid of it.
They've already been there for
All right,
gosh.
that makes sense to me. All right, so any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to speak to this? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the 3 variances to the front yard setbacks on the 3 parcels for S-2024-29 with the staff recommendations.
Rachel makes the motion. Do I have a second? Sonia seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. Thank you all. Next application, S-2024-30. Hang on just a second. She'll go first. Okay. Yep, thank you.
I'll go first, and then if you need to feel so inclined, then you can
You
just
might be quicker than
leave
she
in the
is. That'd be
back.
okay.
I'm gonna try my best. I would like to note, it was identified that the staff report does reference the wrong names in the background, and I did update that for the printout version, and the PDF version is corrected, so everything is good from there. It just was an error that I printed off an old version for you guys, and not for me. You guys got the short straw. Anyway, this is a conditional use permit for a secondary residence for a family member or farm worker at 4816 Ironworks Road. Direct access and arterial access being Ironworks Road, about a half a mile south of Ironworks and Hidden Creek Drive. Agriculturally zoned, 74 acres. Staff does recommend approval of the application. This is an aerial shot of the property here. I have a zoomed in portion here with the north being at the top of the screen. I've identified the existing residence and 2 outbuildings in the approximate location of the proposed residence. When we're reviewing these, we're trying to make sure that we're meeting our density standard or having no greater than 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres of land. And being that this is a 74-acre parcel with only 1 house on it, there is sufficient acreage available to essentially designate for the proposed residence. It observes all of our setback requirements between that and existing property lines, and as always, we recommend that you get an address for your residences or buildings that need a residence or an address, and you build at least 100 feet from the existing residence so that in the instance that you need to subdivide a property in the future, we don't require variances at that time. Ultimately, this does not adversely impact public health, safety, welfare, nor alter the character, and staff does recommend approval of the application, subject to 7 conditions here. First 4 are typical for. 5th is you get an address. 6th is you build it 50 feet from property lines and 100 feet from existing residences. And 7th is that in the instance that an additional entrance is needed, they contact KYTC to get an entrance permit.
Okay. Any questions for Elise?
Quick enough?
Yes, thank you. Anything you would like to add?
No, I really,
All right,
the only thing,
Good call.
perfect. You can add if you'd like to.
it doesn't, where I have no road frontage, it doesn't need a new number 7.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. You don't need it from,
We always put
yeah.
it just in case you do.
Yeah, District 7 you don't need. Right,
Don't
okay.
worry about that.
Anybody else that would like to speak on this application? Well, that was easy. All right, if not, I'll just make the motion. How's that? I make a motion to approve application S-2024-30, taking into account the staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
A second.
Janet beat you to it, Tommy. Janet seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. Thank you. Last application for the evening, S-2024-31.
Thank you. As always in the county, we get some unique requests, and this is a conditional use permit request for a private recreational area for a multi-use facility that includes gathering space, test kitchen, event venue, visitor center, business, office, some storage associated with a truffle farm operation. It's a rather unique operation. I actually learned a lot about this a while ago, and we've been having discussions between our office and the applicant and the property owner on how we would go through this process, and we recommended that they first get a use permit. So that's what we're reviewing here tonight. This is located at 2663 Paynes Depot Road. It is a newly assigned address, so it may be hard to find it if you were to Google it and try to go visit the sites like I know we like to do. This is located at the intersection of Moores Mill Road and Paynes Depot Road. They are proposing using Paynes Depot Road as their principal access point. In a previous plat, It did identify that it had road frontage onto Moore's Mill, but it didn't have a driveway to Moore's Mill. So I reference it as something that technically could offer access, but it's not directly through. It's through an adjoining parcel under the same ownership. It's northwest of Payne's Depot and Moore's Mill, and it's about a quarter of a mile south of the interstate exit of 64 and US 62. It is a 41.6 acre parcel zoned agricultural, and staff does recommend approval. At the same time as this application before us tonight, there has been an application submitted to the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission for a development plan. So if this ultimately got approved, we would be seeing a plan coming forward within the next 10 days or so for that use. So it isn't something that should impact you guys' decision. It's just something to be aware of. There are signs on the property. They sent out mail. We sent out mail. There's a bunch of stuff going on, it feels like, on this property. And this meeting tonight is to really just discuss the use that's before us. If this ultimately was approved, the actual action of developing the property for said use would be heard at the meeting of the Planning Commission on the 11th. Same location, a little bit later, same property, all that jazz. This is the property here on the screen now. I've identified the portion that the use permit and the development plan are being proposed on, but it is important to note that it's bound by the roads to the south, and then to the north and west is property under the same ownership as this site. So a lot of their kind of preparatory work is going to occur on the property where they're keeping crops and stuff like that. And then the actual property that this application is on is the actual location where the business operations would be occurring. This is an operation interested in doing some agricultural business. It is doing truffle farming, which I learned a lot about from them. They can definitely explain it better than I could. But I'll give a brief summary of, it's a large grove of trees planted with truffles kind of put into the ground with it. And then you send out dogs, or if you've watched the Nicolas Cage movie, A Pig, to go out and find the truffles to make money, and then to distill into accents for cooking. So oils and then also shavings are often used. They are proposing, and they have performed some plantings of some trees on their parcel that is not the subject for this use permit application, but they have been doing some kind of agricultural operations to the property to the north. So if you went by and you look at it now and you look at it 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago, there may be some variation in the level of tree coverage or activity on the property, and they're just doing some typical A1 agricultural product work in plantings. So at this point on the property, this is kind of how close we are to everybody else. This is more of a wide scale one. I do have a more zoomed in one showing the adjoining farms specifically, and I did perform my measurements. So it is about 3.25 miles south of the Georgetown city limits and 3 miles east of the Midway city limits. 3 miles east, or 2.5 miles east of the Midway Road Industrial Park in that respective intersection, in exit ramp for I-64, and then in more contextual things that we are a little bit more aware of, it's about 3/4 mile north of the AFIX property, which we are familiar with, the US 62 railway intersection, and then about 1.25 miles north of the Leestown Road commercial area, which are both in Scott County. So just to kind of contextualize, this is an area that we often get questions about, is this area ever going to develop? This is an interchange. It has retained an agricultural character throughout this extended period of time, and we would expect that it would retain that as much as possible. This is a more zoomed in property. I've identified the adjoining farms. We specifically have the Conley cattle farm to the north, Margot Farm, and the Hill House Farms to the west. To the south, we have Springwood, Katy Rich, Hillstead, Steed, to the south, and then Mintwood to the east across the way from Payne's Depot Road. So this is an area that's retained a lot of its agricultural character, despite all the growth and activity that's been happening in the city of Georgetown. And again, we would like to see it retain that character. It's been identified that this area is very sensitive and should have this, hopefully they're okay, have this kind of feature to it, but also we want to encourage people to pursue agricultural businesses, kind of widen the agricultural base of Georgetown. Getting more specifically into the use, this is a very zoomed out area, but I will zoom in here. They're proposing a multi-use facility, multi-story as well, with some office space, gathering space, outdoor space, and then some related parking, some related maneuverability space for buses and tours, and kind of a little entry, kind of fountain-y entrance type deal. They have expressed an interest in having activities on the sort of day-to-day function where you're having people come and do tours like a bourbon distillery, or events also on the property, tastings, that type of deal. They would like to retain some agricultural character, and I did include some of the exhibits of the building specs of what they want the layout to look like, how the general aesthetic is hopefully going to fit within the character of the area, and we would really prioritize as planning staff that this retain its character regardless of what's going on the property. They have stated that their facility is expected to have about 299 guests. The mix of uses makes calculating parking difficult. That is an item that we would talk about at the development plan phase. We have approved gravel parking for additional space and everything like that at the development plan phase. They're not proposing it right now, so it's not really anything too crazy to worry about. Staff recommends that they be held to the highest level of parking metric. So essentially, if you are multiple uses, but most of your space is gathering, but it could also be storage, we would pick the one that would be the most highest value of parking spaces available to them. Again, that's a development plan phase conversation, but it is something to note that they are having these events and this high level of activity that, again, while parking isn't really the use stuff, the activities that are making all these people park here is important to us. We do have a condition that, or we do have a recommendation that they clearly direct applicants to, or users to Paynes Depot Road. Morris Mill is a county-maintained road. It's rather narrow at times, and there are some bends in it. We'd prefer to keep non-residential users, non-farm specific, of those specific farm users away from those roads to kind of retain that character. It's safer for the farmers, it's safer for the residents, it's safer for the guests to be directed to roads that are more suitable for high levels of activity, which is why we recommend that they use their entrance onto Paynes Depot exclusively for this use, which they do show, which is good for us. They do talk about having some indoor events, and again, they talk about the 299. We, as staff, we want to keep the activity impact, and we want to kind of discourage like really high volume activities every single weekend, every single Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. And so we recommend that a condition be in place that temporary use permit be applied for events that are expected to have a 299 or greater than 299 users on the property. With greater users comes greater traffic flow that's coming in and out, more lights, more noise, more activities. And we really don't want to take away from the pastoral landscape that they seem to be wanting to lean into with this activity. And so in those instances, staff recommends that as part of their condition, if they know a larger event's coming in, say for example, a large wedding showing up, they get a use permit application submitted to our office under review by this board, or this board, but different members if you float off. Come before us, say this is my use, this is the day, this is the timing, this is what they are specifically doing, and then additional conditions either be added or waived depending upon the circumstances. It'd be a case-by-case basis. If we were seeing a sudden influx of much greater activity and much greater number of people, we may also want to call them back in and say, we approved you for $299, and every single time you have an activity, you're asking for a temp permit. This is a lot of folks. Like maybe we need to reconsider new conditions and new consideration and maybe expand it, but you also have to provide additional things like your quiet hours are greater, or you have to shuttle people from an off-site location to the property or something like that to really try to keep this area agricultural and not take away from the residences and farms in that area. They've not made a specification or a statement on if they would have outdoor-only activities. For my purposes, we're considering if you have greater than 51% of activities being held outdoors, that is a more outdoor-only activity. if you're having parties, you're having music, you're having noise and people and more lights. And we really want to make sure that it's carefully considered, that we try to keep people indoors as much as possible if we have a lot of people running around, making a lot of noise, bringing a lot more vendors in. It can be rather disruptive to the character of the area. So we would like to see that if they are proposing outdoor stuff, if they want festivals, if they are going to specialize in outdoor weddings, that we essentially have them come back to us and say, hey, I got my indoor permit approved already, if that is where the board leads to tonight. But I also want to do some more outdoor stuff. And so we essentially just kind of separate the two to make sure that we are taking everything into proper consideration. Because a lot of what we're talking about as staff is based off of the interior space. And so if there's different challenges when it becomes an exterior space, when you're adding lighting and venue features and patios and grading, there's a lot of impacts that we're not considering because it's just not something that's here tonight. I'll pause for a second. Is everybody good so far?
Well, something keeps going through my mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Has the KTC been involved in this with like potential of 299 cars on there? Would they have to be, Charlie, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet have to have?
I'm not sure.
I'm happy to speak on this when you get to
Okay.
me, if you would like.
Yes,
Not to
please.
push you off, but I'm happy to answer that question.
Okay, there we go.
Yes. We do have an encroachment permit. I did submit it with you guys and everything, but the level of activity I cannot pull off the top of my head, and I don't want to misspeak. So I'll leave it to their engineer to speak more to it at that point. Continuing onwards, there's no sewer availability on the property. There's no sewer line really close to there. Darren's putting in a small portion of a sewer line, but
Stay away from that.
we want to stretch out as much as we can. It's not really an option. It's 3 miles away.
That's
So
south of me, keep going.
yeah, exactly. So we are expecting that this would be on a septic system or a similar system. They need to work with the health department to make sure the system they choose is appropriately scaled and managed to make sure that we aren't creating an environmental issue in this area. There's also, I don't know if it's they propose using a dumpster system, but Herbie's may also be utilized, and we want to make sure that it's kept really clean on that property. So we would want waste management to be consistently making sure everything's taken care of and not detracting from the character of the area. I then talk about in the staff report the buffer ordinance. It's been about a year now actually, so congratulations, happy year. The ordinance specifies additional fencing be required for instances where there's a change of use from traditional agricultural activities to any additional activities. In previous conversations, we have considered private recreational areas as an additional extra change of use that would require the additional boundary fencing. As the adjoining property owner, they may want to waive that requirement. I would anticipate that they would. And at the development plan phase, they would need to request a waiver, and I believe they have requested a waiver to that requirement along the property lines in instances for this type of use. We've not really seen any ag areas that have adjoined cities where we've actually had to do this on a city level. It's mostly been ag against ag with an additional use. So just something to be aware of there. Kind of stepping more into the potential impacts. As I've stated many, many times already in this presentation, there's not a lot of activity in this area. We're rather far from city centers. We're rather far from interstate exits that have a lot of industrial users, and we're really close to farms. So we want to be extra considerate as staff and as the board that we take care to make sure that this is not going to detract from the character of the general vicinity. And that includes a lot of loud noises, high volumes of people, regularly, additional lights, just general increased site activity. We don't want this to become a warehousing facility. We want it to keep its natural character. I've outlined in the staff report specific items that we typically most often are considering, but there may be additional considerations that we're not seeing right now that I might be thinking of. You may think of that we may want to warrant additional conditions, but I'll go through the ones that I have right now. To address the potential of excessive noise, the applicant proposes a self-imposed quiet time of 11 p.m. It's not specified what quiet time means, so I've just kind of made that as a note, but we can obviously ask them for what clarification on that one. Since this has a business office and storage component, staff recommends that a business operations, oh, do you guys have a question or?
Not yet.
No, we're
Okay.
writing
Okay, very
things down
good.
as you talk.
Staff recommends a condition that business operations which require heavy truck traffic, so box trucks or greater, or high volumes of staff be kind of kept away from the property in the late evenings and kind of kept to an operating window of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. This is just to be considerate of your other neighbors. We're not expecting a lot of heavy activity, and there may be like 1 or 2 people on the property. We don't want to stop them from, if someone has to close out and it's 11:05 and now you're getting the sheriff's office call on you because technically you violated your permit, but it's just one person. We don't want to negatively kind of impact them that way, but we also want to make sure that we're not getting late night deliveries, late night pickups, really heavy traffic at midnight, that type of deal. So that's what that condition's intent is for. Related to business operations, we propose a condition that amplified music be kept indoors to reduce the amount of noise that could be kind of spread into the area. Yes, there is an interstate exit. Yes, there is an industrial park, but loud like rap music, heavy country music, a lot of noise can really negatively impact people's character, sense of area and everything like that, and can be rather irritating. So we want to make sure that these are kept considerate of their neighbors and kept indoors as much as we can. We also recommend a consideration that outdoor activities be out no later than 10 p.m. to just kind of essentially hang out outside until when most people are going to bed, and then come inside and then leave in an hour. So it kind of gives people a transitional time to kind of gather themselves and go. Obviously that can be discussed, but we want to make sure that we're extra considerate of the surrounding area, make sure we're not creating an atypical use and activity. You may want to consider, and I mentioned it briefly, it may be worthwhile to consider an accommodation for that rule that would allow for the activities on Friday nights, Saturday nights be kind of adjusted accordingly, because those tend to be the more active nights when people are out more often. And large events may be held those times. Obviously, that's at your guys' discretion. I just wanted to identify that there may be an argument for consideration of essentially an accommodation for those evenings. The last one is, and the last two are really related to activity levels as well as the first one. So I don't know why I kind of phrased it that way. I talked about the temporary use permit side of things previously in the facilities conversation. I just want to mention it again that if, like, the cap that they're saying right now is $299, and I think the staff recommends that the application be approved at a max of $299 because that's what we've been given. If they are interested in having greater, it's a no-go unless we have a temp permit for a one-time use, essentially, to have a large volume of people for a festival, the grand opening. We just want to make sure that we're not having it be a regular thing and we're enabling a really high volume activity that's really inconsiderate of the area. With high volumes of people, it may require additional security on the property. Sheriff's office may need to be present to direct traffic safely, and we want to make sure that we're aware of that. So if you have to have a sheriff's office person there and it's a one-time thing, someone may get really confused and it may cause a lot of misunderstandings. And so if we have those levels of activities that would require it, we just want to make sure that we would review it essentially as a unique circumstance and do all the proper notification of everybody around them with our use permit and BOA application review stuff. So it's just something important to consider. Last one talks about just lighting fixtures. Because there's not a lot of development around it and there's the interstate exit and the property is, the location of the venue is to the north corner of the property, it's really just adjoining its own self, and there is expected to have, we are expecting to have some plantings that would mitigate the lighting impacts on adjoining property owners. So I don't really speak too much about that one. If it becomes an issue, or if you guys feel it's warranted to add additional conditions on lighting, we can discuss that with the applicant at that point. But staff believes that the location and the status of ownership just directly north kind of will mitigate a lot of the lighting impacts that could be potentially flashing onto adjoining property owners or roads. My general thesis is that activities proposed are a wide range. There's a lot of stuff that could be happening on this property with 50 people to 299 to 500 people. 500 people would be a very good day for them, I would hope. And we just want to make sure that these can fit within this area. I mention it a lot, there's a lot of farms, there's a lot of, this is not a developed area, and we want to be extraordinarily considerate of the areas that are in, and of these farms that are in this area, to make sure that if they want to do their agricultural business, that it fits with everybody else, and that it is a unique one, and it may be warranted in this community, but just make sure that it's done in such a way that it fits within this community. And so it is incidental to agricultural businesses and industries. It's located on a major roadway. It's not really close to a lot of major residential developments. So it could be a very well-suited area for this level of activity. We just want to make sure that we take care to protect the existing users as well as the future users from any negative impacts. These are the 6 findings I talk about here. I kind of long-windedly talked about a lot of the findings. If you'd like to read them, you can. I'm going to move on. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit. We do recommend 16 conditions, which is a very large volume for us. I don't think we rarely breach 10. The first 4 are typical for the use permits or anything else. 5th is in progress. They have filed the preliminary development plan. We do put it on every condition or use permit that may or may not have an application, but may or may not have an application for a development plan, but would warrant an application for a development plan, just to make sure that they know we have other things you have to do. This is not you get this and you go. There is a process, and this is just step 1. I talk about the other agencies that are applicable, specifically the fire department and the health departments related to public safety and everything like that. Condition 8 is just also related to health department, making sure that they're operating in safe compliance with the health department. Condition 9 is talking about having an appropriate sized waste management system and be kept in good condition. We don't want it to become an eyesore on this area. Conditions 10 and 11 talk about their outdoor noise curfew that we recommend and their quiet time cutoff that they reference. That also includes my condition 12, which is saying that an activity curfew be in place from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. for heavy trucks and large volumes of staff on the property. Again, we want to make sure that this keeps its landscape. 13 talks about the number of people on the property. We want to keep the activity reasonable and to what we've been told. We don't want to let them have an unlimited number. We want to keep a number on it, and it may be worthwhile that the board considers a smaller number. It's obviously at your guys' discretion and at testimony of adjoining property owners and the applicant that an additional consideration be made. Condition 14 talks about a temporary use permit application that we would require be filed, and I specifically use 4 months because it gives us sufficient time to contact fire department, to contact the health department, to make sure that our ducks are in a row, and it just gives us time in case something gets postponed for a month. We want to make sure that we get as much advance notice for this surrounding area if something's going on, and we just want to make sure that these are done reasonably to try to keep everything as transparent as possible. Condition 15 is talking about directing guests to Paynes Depot Road and not going down Moores Mill. We want to keep Moores Mill. And then condition 16 is talking about a return. So I don't reference it previously, but essentially, if this gets approved and they get their development plan approved and they build it all out, which is a lot of ifs, they let us know when they're going to open. Or by us, I mean the board, let you guys know that you're going to open, and then within a year of that date, they essentially come for their return. We have had instances in the past where we've put an arbitrary year on stuff, and then the arbitrary year is like, well, it's been a year and I'm still building right now. So we want to have a condition that essentially says, tell us when you start, and then once you start, you have a year of operating before you come back and we evaluate your conditions. It is long-winded, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that we express that it's not just a year from today, it's a year from whenever you open. Besides that, again, very long, very wordy presentation. I'm sure you guys have some questions.
Before we go down the questions, just one of the requirements, and I agree with the recommendations and the conditions of approval. But one of the things on number 14, and I understand why you're asking for 4 months, I do, but I'm also over on the business side too. 4 months is extremely hard to plan
It is an extremely long
with that short of time. So
Yes.
when you start looking at that, I think I would lean more towards 2 months. I know you're going to shoot me for that.
That's fine.
But just because I've had it happen to me. And
Yeah,
4
you do get a
months is-
last minute one.
It is. You get a last minute thing that pops up and now all of a sudden you can't do it. right?
Yes.
So I want to be cognizant of the neighbors. I want to be cognizant of Moore's Mill, but I also want to be beneficial to business owners too and say, okay, let's meet in the middle there somewhere. So that's a long time.
I agree. I do understand with that one. I do also, in the text, I believe, reference that they may, in the text, I say that they may apply for a temporary use permit 4 months prior to, or unless the applicant can demonstrate why accommodation and consideration of a use permit outside of that 4-month window. It's not specifically referenced in the condition itself. So we do have that additional clause in the body of it, but if we want to put it specifically in there, we can talk about adding an additional sentence or amending that condition to 2 months, or I was gonna say 18 weeks, but that's more than 4 weeks.
Personally, I'd like to see 2 months just because I'm on the other side of that. So I've seen that happen.
I completely understand, and obviously it's at your guys' discretion and discussion, and you may haggle and everything like that.
Clarification on page 3, because so we're talking about outdoor music, because if you have a venue at a site like this, there are going to be people outside. That's just a given. To some. Then you have a little paragraph there. The applicant has made no statement on or if outdoor only event activities will be held on the property. You recommend that if they are interested in doing so, or a majority is outside, you said you want them to file or require an amended application be filed for outdoor only. That just seems like we're already addressing some outside things. I don't know why we would have to have a separate application for them to turn around and use this for outdoor events.
That is
Can we not address it all?
We can. I just wanted to make sure that we identified that this application that we've been given is mostly talking about the indoor side with some outdoor as a secondary activity. If it is the inverse, where it is primarily outdoors and indoors is secondary for using the restroom or getting relief from the heat, that can easily be something we talk about. It's just not something that was portrayed in the application information.
And that's fine. I just want to clarify
Yes.
that we all realize she's just talking
It's just
about
like-
application for
Yeah.
indoor majority. Okay.
I would like to also state that since moving into this area, and this is just a personal anecdote, there are a lot more outdoor crop-related festivals than up by my parents' place. And so when you go to a lot of these venues, they are 99% outdoors. And that is different. It's like 75% outdoors, 25% indoors is very different from everything's outdoors, except for if you absolutely have to run inside because you're staffed to get more food. So that's what that kind of outdoor-only specification is for, at least in our mind, because that's not an item. They're not talking about bringing tents to the property. They're not talking about a plan for providing outdoor seating and that type of deal. And those may fit great, and we can consider and discuss that tonight, but it may be something that requires additional kind of review that we just don't have the information on right now.
No, I mean, it's easier if we separate them. I'll just
Yeah.
verify that for the rest.
Any other
Yeah, it is a
questions?
weird language, yes.
Tommy, any questions from you?
No.
Janet? All right, thanks, Elise.
Very good.
All right, the applicant or representative for the applicant.
Yes. John Hunt, MLH Civil. Members of the board, I'm happy to I'll go to your traffic question if you like first. So currently, the applicant has a encroachment permit with Transportation Cabinet to put a new farm entrance at the location that I'm showing now. Obviously, we're not building a farm entrance. So before this is ultimately completely done, I will have to go back to them, tell them this is what we're really building, a double lane road, a double lane driveway in, and get their approval at that time. So yes, there is a KYTC permit, but not for the size of the entrance that we're going to put in today, or that we're proposing to put in. I have located it at the location based on the site distance that entrance, that farm entrance was noted, but it's not sized for that that level of entrance yet.
I
Okay?
believe, Rachel and I were talking about that too. I believe that's a condition in a preliminary development plan.
Yes.
So they're gonna have to go back and do that anyway.
Yes, yes, yes,
It would be at
yes.
that time, in
Yeah.
the final development plan, they would have to have the updated encroachment permit submitted.
Yes.
Before
Yes.
they could start construction.
I am painfully aware. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll do a couple, of the sewer, if you have any concern. Personally, I'm not concerned about it yet. We have not gone through the complete evaluation yet. Again, we're very, say, early in the process, but we're still a little early in the process. Probably be getting that application into the health department. We have done some geotech at the building site. We've got 14 feet of soil, which surprised me tremendously. I thought they were lying to me, to be honest, when they said that how deep it was. So there's, seems to be plenty of dirt on the hill right where this is kind of going. Going back to the 299 magical number, just so you guys understand where that number comes from, I'm gonna blame the architect. It is his fault, but that is what the building size generates a number. This is how many people you could mathematically fit into that building. I don't think that's a very realistic number. I think it's too high, personally, based off my understanding of how they intend to use the property. But 299 is a fine number. We have no problem with, you know, if that's the magical number that we want to use, that's no problem. To kind of put the parking and things like that into perspective, as Elise said, and she explained it all beautifully, so I applaud you, Elise. There's a lot of nonsense to go through to get to the point to try to explain it. There's multiple different generators to get to how many parking spaces do you need for this type of facility. Square footage. There's the ITE parking generation manual. There is a number of, you know, if you use the 300, 299 is the magical number. It can go anywhere from 67 spaces to 108 spaces. So while 299 seems like a lot of cars, you don't really have to park 299 cars. It's theoretically more in the 67 to 100. We're showing 66, or we exceed the, whatever that number was now in the development plan, with the expandability to get up to 100 very, very easily. So that's kind of my comments to sort of the bigger items. And then obviously, we have no problem if you'd like to amend number 14 down to 2 months. I'll take you to, I'll ask for 1, but you know, I'll settle at 2 if you want.
I wouldn't go too far.
I'll make a deal. And then as far as the inside versus outside, I agree with you. I can't tell you with the 100% confidence exactly how everything's going to go. But overall, the 16 conditions, we have no problem with them. We feel like they're fair. We feel like they're within the intent of what we've explained. And at this moment, they're within the intent of how the property is designed to be used. So that's kind of where we're at. So, and I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to this?
I live across the road on Worsonville, and
Come on up.
I'm
You got to come to the podium, if you will. Okay, you can stand there. It's fine.
And I'd just like to express my concern. I'd like to invite you guys to my front porch any night and listen to the peace and quiet. And yeah, we have a noise from the interstate, but it's mild. It is a very unique area to live in. I'm very appreciative that Audubon is not being turned into Audubon Estates and violent houses everywhere. But it is, what I feel like it is slippery slope here. We're talking about up to 299, but if you need more, you can have it. And honestly, you know, we have the vineyard, which is in Fayette County. I'm just in Woodford County. One of those counties out there. It all makes it Woodford County, and we already on weekends get noise from that because they have music playing, and I just feel like this could be a slippery slope for our community, and I don't really. Well, I am glad the property is being kept agricultural, very glad it's being kept agricultural. But I just have concerns about the light and the noise, and I was glad to hear that the traffic should be routed onto on Payne's Depot instead of Morse Mill. But I also have concerns about I'm sure you're familiar with the big house in Audubon, that becoming part of it eventually, and you know, the maintenance and the farm being used for that kind of thing, and I just have And honestly, I'd rather not see it happen to our community. I'm surprised there aren't more people here from the community, because I think we all treasure the unique spot that we do have.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Charlie, everything is clear on this?
Yeah, don't even ask me. There's so much here. And it sounds like something that could actually be very well done, and I frankly don't really doubt that they'll do it well. But there's just so much to it. And we've seen some of those things that are done beautifully.
Right.
Not here necessarily, but not that far from here. So, I mean, legally, I don't really see a whole lot as long as we're on top of it and they're on top of it. I certainly understand the comment over there. But legally, no, I think that's appropriate. And that's not the right word I want to use. It certainly can be. And it's, a lot's going to hinge on when the development plan goes through and those things are approved and things are, proportional and whatnot, lighting's proportional. You actually hear noise from the vineyard way over there?
We do. It's not that far. It's a mile and a half, but
Probably comes down the creek, comes down the creek line. Yeah.
My sister-in-law used to live halfway between you and it, so I'm just surprised that it's not farther.
we actually hear noise.
Yeah, okay.
Are you okay with amending that?
Yes.
Are you?
I'm okay with that.
All right. I'm going to make the motion. I do understand what you're saying. I think this could be very beneficial. I also think there could be a whole lot worse things to go near where you guys are at than that. So I'm going to make the motion to approve application -S-2024-31, taking into recommendation the staff recommendation, or taking into account the staff recommendation. However, I would like to amend recommendation number 14 from 4 months to 2 months.
Second.
Motion, I made the motion, Rachel seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All approved by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign. There are none. Motion carries. Thank you all. We have one other item to go over. You're welcome to stick around for more punishment if you'd like, or you can leave now if you want.
I think all people who open these venues should give us a free
tour.
come out for the
yeah.
opening.
Samples, tour, executive treatment.
After we make
I'll
the ruling, it's
party,
not
no
bribery.
fees.
Can I bring you a bottle of bourbon in exchange for a free tour?
I think that's valid.
No, because you haven't given enough.
Jeez, well, I'll give you dirt. All right, so the rule for the issuance.
I'll send you a letter of this tomorrow, or like following that, and Red has all this stuff on this. He's known all this stuff that I've been telling him, so we've been kind of on the same page on it.
Me too. Never hunted for a truffle before in my life, but.
If they develop it, where they're gonna sell it to another developer who wants to make it into a residential
Right.
subdivision, I'm like, listen,
when
this
they-
is a win-win.
When they see what we're getting ready to develop.
Can't see stars anymore.
Yeah, I wish. All right.
One cell tower.
I actually will address that just quietly. Because I'm pretty, yeah.
But I mean, I'd rather have.
Oh, these are fun. Oop.
Make it a big huge farm.
Right behind that.
Yeah, right in front of my house.
I used to serve a lot of these.
Did ya? Did ya?
This one? Yes. You
wanna do this one?
No, that's
Do people
okay.
get mad at you a lot?
I don't have a badge anymore.
Those are just for reference purposes. You don't have to keep them if you don't want them, but I just wanted to show everybody, like, since this is apparently clear for the person who's ever done this as a board adjustment on our level.
Charlie, Elise, let's go through this.
Are we gonna get drunk with power?
Yeah, it looks like it. They already gave me a gavel.
I'm sorry, Janet. That was such a dense one. I'm so sorry. So our last item is an amendment to the bylaws to add subpoena power to the Board of Adjustment, essentially as a administrative, not board action related thing, I think is what Charlie's described it to me as, to just get information available to us and kind of take action. Apparently it's something that we've been enabled to do by state statute for when Charlie was young, so when dust was not dust, I guess. Anyway, I digress. It's something that has been a power that's been vested in boards of adjustment through KRS 100 since when it was established. And after circumstances that we are aware of have occurred, we believe it is important to add it to our bylaws as a power that can be done administratively by the board.
Charlie,
Yes,
since my name's on this with yours,
Yes, sir.
what liability is there for the Board of Adjustments and, quite frankly, me?
None either way. Generally speaking, this would be handled just like subpoenas out of district court, out of any administrative agency that has subpoena power. It's really amazing because it's been in the law for 50 years. I'm not aware of anybody ever using it.
Oh, good.
I'm not
Where
aware-
the
There
first-
are 0 appellate decisions in Kentucky where anybody's contested one, I mean, any kind of controversy about one. The only reason I'm suggesting actually the rules being added is because if you just read the statute, you might, then probably would think, well, the board has to issue it each time. And that's not so. Subpoenas are ministerial. They're not board action. They're not substantive of anything. If, as in this case, and I'm going to ask you to sign a couple here.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Just in,
But
Test it out for the first
if
time.
you have to go each time and wait for a board meeting,
that's what I'm saying.
then, number one, you kind of miss the opportunity and you really drag things out even further than things get drug out anyway. So all this does is explain that it doesn't have to be, because it's not based on whether you think one should issue, it's based on if someone requests one. Just like if I've got a hearing coming up in district court and I want to subpoena 10 witnesses, they don't ask me, well, why do you want them? What are you going to do with that? You know, what do they know? No, they give me a piece of paper. In fact, it's changed so now I sign my own subpoena. Now, don't even have to have the court or clerk sign it anymore. I mean, they're strictly ministerial. And in just a minute, the ones I will give you will be a subpoena I'm requesting, which is kind of funny since I'm also going to be signing it. But a subpoena issued to Harrington to get some specifics from him instead of just simply what we're hearing around the neighborhood, and to Qualex, who supposedly is a company that uses him for subcontracts for painting.
Great.
Down in 24. So there's no reason for you all to have a hearing on whether we ought to have that information. It's just simply that's pertinent information to what is going to be pending or what is pending in front of you guys. If a neighbor saw something and wanted to know about it, really didn't have enough information, they could even request a subpoena. Harrington could request a subpoena. We could have a meeting where these 3 applications, they could all be requesting. I hope nobody ever tells them about it.
Yeah.
But that's the way these are supposed to be, strictly ministerial. Somebody requests it, the chair or vice chair can sign it, I countersign it, and make it officially part of the record. We give it to the sheriff's office. I put in here, and this is a tiny bit of liberty, that the sheriff or the constable, because the sheriff's got a whole lot more papers to be filed than constables. We can get a constable and file things within a couple hours. Sheriff's office can often say, well, we'll get it to you, Monday or Tuesday. The statute refers specifically to the sheriff's office. I can't imagine one law enforcement over another would really make that much difference. So for convenience sake, I stuck that in there. I doubt anybody's ever going to sue us over that either. Now, other than that, there is no liability. It's just strictly a matter of, if we put in here a secretary can sign it, then the secretary can sign it. We put it in there and took a foreman, it doesn't matter. It's ministerial only, so no substantive exposure, whatever.
All right.
We could have used this on Seabury for the wedding thing, couldn't we?
Oh, that guy would never give us information, even with subpoenas.
Could we subpoenaed all the couples that got married by them, though?
I have 2
What do you
questions.
pay them?
Yeah.
So I still have a couple questions. So number one, what if they ignore it?
I'm sorry?
What if they ignore it?
It says in
Oh,
there.
paragraph 3.
Thanks.
There is, and I've never seen this done, so I can't tell you exactly how it would work, but according to the statute, we can literally file a very simple motion or petition in circuit court, and boom, they will rubber stamp a compel order to make them, by state certain or face contempt of court. So this gives us a whole lot more information as well as clout than just enforcement officers up at P&Z saying, we're going to give you the money, you've got to get this done, because we see too often, they just thumb their nose.
Yep. So this always raises, anytime a sheriff's deputy visits somebody's home, this always puts somebody on notice, which makes them agitated when they come into these meetings. Can we have something on standby where we do have a sheriff's officer
Yes.
here during those meetings only?
We've done that. We did it when I was on the planning
But
commission.
this should be standard,
my
like
name's
you
on
said,
it.
if someone compelled to come in here angry, then we may need to have some backup.
You know, all I can say is.
I'll start packing if you want me to.
Me too. I can too, but
I can too.
Request can always be made to the sheriff's office.
I'll ask my
and
friend.
Especially this year, I dare say they would send somebody.
well, P&Z, I think, our fiscal court has them every time now.
We do not have it at P&Z.
Or maybe it's Georgetown City. Maybe
I
Georgetown
believe
City.
it is the city of Georgetown. We have,
Boy, that place like a play.
But if we have someone
usually do
compelled
have
to be
police
here
officers.
against their will, that's a definite
Yeah.
situation where I would like to have.
we've had police officers at City of Sadieville Board of Adjustment meetings because things got contentious and we asked for one to
Well-
be there. Charlie's not involved in it, but we've had it. Like, I've had sheriff's office members or local officers be at these meetings to keep things in line.
Well, I mean,
He showed up late, but
if
like,
I'm
that's
running
not
the
the
meeting, I'm
matter.
going to do my best to de-escalate the situation. However, these people are going to be pissed off, for lack of better terms. So I wouldn't mind having
Well,
somebody.
and also notice, you may not,
Then it shouldn't be on you when problems comes up. It's not us. It should be
I
somebody
mean,
else.
and you've seen, not everybody, but you've seen the actual subpoena form.
I have.
It gives the alternative.
It does.
If you don't want to fool with this, then just turn over the stuff.
Right.
Which is what, in fact, it's kind of a screwy situation in court, because you have to not just subpoena the stuff, but you've got to set a deposition at which they give you the stuff. Nobody ever wants to hold that deposition because it's too expensive and time consuming. So you say, if you turn it over ahead of time, we cancel the deposition. Well, you don't even schedule the thing, but it's got to be in the paperwork, or else the court will, well, you can't do it. You've got to have it, it's rules. This doesn't have that. So what we would do, and we need to talk about this too, let's just say, for example, we wanted this for a hearing, say 2 weeks hence. Then, as long as they provided that, say, 2 days before the hearing, then that's fine. One of these, well, the guy probably needs to be there anyway. On the other one, Qualex probably doesn't need to be here. So, of course, on the other hand, I expect Qualex to be very cooperative. Maybe not, you know.
I think they'll put pressure on him and back out.
But it will put tons of pressure on. But no, Qualex, I expect them, whatever that deadline date is, we'll have their stuff then.
Yeah.
Besides, they keep better records. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, a
They have
single
to.
business person, they never have the records that, you know, a company's gonna have.
All right. So I have no issue with any of the subpoenas. I don't have any issue with that. If we choose to request to the sheriff's office, if we hear chatter or anything else, and we want to have a sheriff's deputy here, who makes that request?
Probably most likely.
I just
it would
ask
be
for
either
it.
you
I
or
just
Cheryl.
contact, we
Not
contact
Joe
them
now.
or,
Okay.
well, then me.
But probably the better thing to do would be for you as chairman of this particular board.
That's fine.
And just contact the sheriff, and I just can't imagine Tony's gonna say no to that.
No, I don't think so.
Now,
either.
Yeah.
and
Or-
one
yeah.
other thing, have one there for the first time this takes place, and we may decide,
That's what I'm thinking. Let's see how
Yeah,
it goes. Have one there for the
that's
first
true.
time. If it goes well, then we don't need it.
and we may not need one,
Right.
you know, another time, but. the
Yeah,
first time probably
circumstantial,
would be
we
that.
have one
So
available.
remind me when this takes place, and I'll call Tony.
That's fine.
My
I mean,
neighbor is a
that's
deputy.
something we can discuss is,
Yeah.
He has to live by me, so he'd be glad to be here.
Well, Jeremy Nettles is family. I don't admit that to everybody, but that's Dudley's nephew.
We'll try to forget that.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, now, second thing, well, first off, we need a motion and second, and.
I'll make the motion.
On that.
Okay, I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Now, next thing we need to do.
I'm sorry, Janet, I know you're hungry.
We've got
Stay that way.
to have a date at which these things are to be returned. You know, a deadline date, which would be the next meeting. I've been thinking about that. The best result would be maybe a couple of weeks for a special meeting. On the other hand, I don't want to have a special meeting. I know you all don't want to have a special meeting. This thing has already been going on a while. So how about we just simply say next regular meeting, our August meeting?
I think they need to have the, if they're, yes,
And
next
then
regular
with-
meeting.
Then with the date prior to that,
That's what I was thinking. 2 weeks before that, you need to have all the paperwork in.
yeah, okay. Now, with Harrington, we're still probably gonna want him in here. Although, on the other hand, we get the paperwork and it kind of lays it out all too
Didn't-
clearly. He may not even need to be here because
Isn't he the guy that I flat told don't do business until you resign?
he's the guy you flat told.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what-
Does he
There's-
get back in the office or contact with the office?
He
or his
may be in
wife?
contact with Joe,
Oh, he's tons of contact.
but
because
he
he's
does
on
not
the board.
talk
He just has
to
straight out,
me.
remember,
Yeah.
because he can't like.
He doesn't-
That's
He
my
won't work
fault. I
with
finally
me.
just blurted it out.
His wife will come by with
permit?
stuff,
Yeah.
and I've gotten
So
He's still doing it.
what else
thick
can we do?
volumes of paper
We can
that is
take
just
away from him on
Well,
not usable
I thought we
paper,
revoked it, so. it's not gone.
essentially.
It is revoked. Yeah.
Right,
But,
so
uh,
what,
We've gotten some things, but not like.
Well, just, yeah,
That's like-
quickly on that. Let me write this down.
We met earlier this morning to talk about, between ourselves, building inspection and electrical inspection, to talk about what's going on and where we're gonna go from there. So Charlie can speak more to that one,
Well,
but
what
permits
we're
were
gonna be
permits
doing,
and,
Once we get this stuff in, we'll give him a show cause, he'll appear here, and either we work it out, which I really kind of doubt, or maybe in the meantime, he might even file an application. Although he was told, get your stuff together and come back in about 30 days, please. Well, that's now well past that. That was the middle of April that passed. So the next thing I would recommend, and I was going to do it tonight, but then it occurred to me, this would be the time to institute subpoenas. So it'd probably be the August meeting, but to get permission to file suit, and it would be with a restraining order request. And it's funny, nothing's going right as far as photographs and all down there, virtually nothing. They even took my suggestion to put one of those
trail
trail
cam.
cams up in the trees right across the road. Wireless is so bad, and maybe their technical expertise is so lacking, they can't get anything out of it. They can't even climb up there and pull a card out and give me a photograph. So I don't know what that's about. Guy up the road, just by sheer luck, recognizes some of the stuff being hauled in to be painted, because he used to have that contract on the other side of the county.
No,
No, Greg.
Greg,
He
our
had a
bestie.
contract with Qualex for ages. He's painted more of those big crane cabs than you can count.
I know they are.
And it says
And
Linkville
he was
too.
out there in his front field doing some weed eating or some bush hogging. And there goes one by down on a trailer. He said, my God, I know what that is.
Wait, it gets better.
Yeah, well, so does it. He used to work for him. So not only that, but then he goes down the road and he watches, and that's where he pulls in. He takes a big photo. So we got a photo of a big link belt cab sitting up there ready to be painted.
So I have multiple questions during this meeting. If this individual shows up and now we're forced to make decisions, that is a completely separate way to handle things than a typical meeting. Right? That's how.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, in fact, what we would probably do is, we'd give him notice that we're gonna be doing it, that I'm gonna be making that request, put him on the agenda, give him notice well in advance, he can come and make his case. And at that point, we will have the subpoenaed stuff. And either he's gonna have to agree to something, and frankly, he spent so much money down there, there's no way I can see him really agreeing to it. Then I'll ask for a vote to authorize filing suit, and we'll just go from there.
So we'll do the rest of the agenda first and clear.
It will be the last item on the agenda.
Probably ought to, but on the other hand, you want people, pissed off sitting out there forever.
Yeah, well, this is true.
It depends on also when he files it, like we put it in by order.
At 5:30, let's try to get everybody else pushed through.
Yeah, we all need to.
Yes, it is specifically August 1st, 5 PM. If you are not here,
That's funny.
that is too bad. You are showing
Yes,
up.
probably so, because it's threatened litigation in the sense of someone is threatening you with litigation. Well, in this case, we're preparing, to threaten our own litigation.
We're threatening.
On
We're not
the
getting
other hand,
threatened.
I kind of like the guy to know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because so far, he hasn't gotten the understanding, and he is spending a Like, for 4
He's just not worried about us, period.
7 years you managed to keep me on court on the 8th.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, we kept you out of court a little bit with AFIX and like all that
But,
stuff.
we told,
Yeah, I got close.
You got real close.
I almost put us in court on that one, sorry, Joe.
Yep.
You're doing this one.
I heard about that. I watched the video and I was like, damn.
Anyway, so
Anyway.
I'll put on there next August, or the August meeting, a couple of weeks ahead of that. In fact, what have I got on there now for that at the time?
I might get to use my gavel.
Yeah, you've used it, I think, once or twice.
I used it.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It's scared, Jen. It jumped out of her skin. I'm gonna
So if
grab.
I use the
When I
gavel, I
called
have to
it
announce
to
I'm
order,
getting
I
ready.
didn't
I'm
know.
just gonna grab this and
It was
put
my
it back,
first
so,
meeting.
if you guys don't want that, I'm trying to take
I would stream or anything, Rachel.
Oh, I remember now, Darren. I did not put in there the alternate date, because I didn't want that in black and white in case we had to differ a little bit over that. So I just simply said, if you wish to avoid this, then you need to get the stuff in ahead of time. And then we can talk about that, and then if it's at all reasonable, I'll just go along with that.
Yeah.
If it's not, then I'll tell them to shove it and see if, all
Yeah, you can't give it to us one day before.
Yeah. So,
All right.
okay?
You need me to sign something?
Yes, we've got,
There's in there. I don't know if,
I'm glad I put the dates before.
well, let's see, what do we got here?
I
Three
did see
hearings?
that, so I was like, this is too much, but I was dropping off the packages. And I felt
There's a
really
Harrington that
weird.
showed up from somewhere.
Yeah, it actually cut you on our security cameras.
Okay, yeah, here's
I
three
thought
of
it
these.
before.
Like that.
Roll it up with my package.
Oh, that's my other thing, okay.